Good day, everyone. Welcome to episode number 8 of Cubicle Lift, an honest conversation on workplace mental health. I'm Josh Rivedal, by the way. I should probably tell you who I am in case you haven't seen or heard who I am. I'm also with the I'm Possible Project, an organization that entertains and engages on mental health and suicide prevention. I'm also a suicide loss survivor. My granddad and my dad of the same side. And I also live with two mental illnesses, clinical depression and generalized anxiety disorder. And I'm here, I'm living, I'm kicking it. I'm doing the best I can, as the rest of us are. I am on this podcast, Zoomcast, with my illustrious, lovely, beautiful co-host, Efrem Epstein. He got 3 adjectives today. And we also have Alison Malmon and Misha Kessler on, which we will introduce in a few moments. I'll go right to Efrem Epstein. We've heard enough out of me. Why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and what's important to you? Please and thank you.
Right. Just so we know that, just so everyone knows that we are live and we are not afraid to disagree with each other, I will make a slight correction. I think we're only at episode 7, not episode 8. But I would say this episode is so good that it almost counts as twice. First off, Josh, thank you as always. I look forward to every episode. One of the things I'm loving about this episode is that 3 people who have basically been players in various parts of my journey in the mental health advocacy world, and 3 people who not only are thought leaders, but really, as I was saying earlier, 3 of the kindest people that you ever meet. I mean, Josh and I, you probably know from 6 previous episodes, when I was first getting to the mental health advocacy space and said, how can I make a difference? And someone said, mentioned Alison's name, and I'm like, oh, but she's a rock star. Like, just call her up. I'm like, but she's a rock star. She's not going to have time for me. And she made time for me. And she gave me so much advice, so much encouragement. And she, if you don't know about Active Minds, you should. So please go to Active Minds website and read about Alison's story, and she'll tell you more about that. But you will read online about all the amazing things she's accomplished. But what you you may not read there is just what a wonderful human being she is, and it's such a pleasure to have her on there. And Misha, who wonderful story, wonderful. You'll hear about his lived experience. I know that he and Alison have a connection. We're doing this episode at tying in to when a number of people are getting back on the college campus after being away for a while. I know Misha has a very important personal story about when he was in college and he went on to win. And it's a very, very win the award for the best college student essay from the Jet Foundation about his lived experience. And I can tell you firsthand what a big accomplishment is. And I'll tell you that because I read some other essays that people have submitted over the years that were rock solid essays. They asked me to look them over before submitting it that did not win. So if those essays were so fantastic, it didn't win. You can only imagine how amazing an essay his is. And he's now doing great things in the workforce. So talk a little bit about that. And also, such a rock solid human being. I don't know a single person that doesn't like Misha. And with that, Alison, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I feel like from where the podcast is done, I don't know how to top what these introductions have been. It's such a pleasure and honor to be able to do this with all of you. I'm Alison Malmon. I am the executive director and founder of Active Minds. And the brief story and my brief experience in this is that I got into mental health and started Active Minds after losing my brother, Brian, to suicide. He had recently left his college and I was a college student when he died. And so I got really interested in young adult mental health and especially mental health within my generation. And it has been my passion and my life's work and my work's life ever since. I subsequently, actually, after losing Brian in 2000, I then lost my grandfather to suicide 6 years later. And so I am a double loss survivor as well. And just think that this work is so important. And especially as we talk about workplace mental health, one of the things that I'm the most inspired by is the fact that folks who've kind of grown up through the active minds generation are now in the workforce and are demanding things of their workplaces that we may not have seen in the past. And so I really feel hopeful, and I see a lot of change already, but I feel hopeful that workplace mental health is going to be changing along the tide of what we've seen within the colleges and high schools, because there's a generation who isn't going to accept silence anymore. And they're given the tools and they're given the education and the power to make some of that change. So just such a pleasure to be able to do this with all of you. And thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you, Alison.
Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you and your work and your energy and efforts. I didn't know about your granddad. I'm deeply sorry for of course, the loss of both of your granddad and your brother. Sometimes, and we'll kick it to you in a sec, Misha, but I just wanted to say, as a loss survivor as well, and that we cross over in some ways, and I do work in suicide prevention. And sometimes I'll tell people, like, I'm not in suicide prevention, I'm in suffering prevention. And that's what we do. And that trickles down so far, and that trickles down to workplace mental health and the conversation that we're having today. So very grateful. Just wanted to that came into my mind. And thank you. And Misha, our first ever conversation. I've known of you for some years now, and I appreciate your efforts and energy. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, thank you guys for having me. I guess, Joshua, I realized that we probably have been in the field about the same timeline. I seem to remember hearing about you two around the same time that I started to get involved. But yes, I'm Misha Kessler. I'm a mission-driven software engineer. So I tried to bring tech to mental health care. My journey started back in college when I was in Washington, D.C. I was going through a pretty severe depressive episode in college as a student at the George Washington University, and I actually had a suicide attempt. I was hospitalized afterwards, and I do credit that with saving my life. That was about 11 years now. I'm realizing I'm coming up on 11 years in 2 weeks. It was after that actually Active Minds, thankfully, came into my life. It was the co-founders and the co-presidents of the Active Minds chapter at GW, Rachel and Amanda, who basically turned me on to advocacy, who helped me realize that I could use my voice for good, who really introduced the concept of lived experience to me, and being open about that thing that I would have been given into the stigma around, I think, had it not been for them. So from there, I kind of dove into policy, research. Since then, I've been involved in quite a few different initiatives and different committees, task forces, all that good stuff. But yeah, these days I am working on a few different tech-driven products, tech-driven mental health care products. But that is about it. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Misha. Glad you're here. Glad you're here, and glad you're here.
Amen.
So let's just kick off some questions. I think this is a great time to hear from our thought leaders and our guests, and F and I might distill or chime in as well, but we'd of course love to hear from Misha and Alison first, because we know the sounds of our voices already. First question, kind of preface, the college arena can be seen, and we are making this a little more college focused, y'all. Who's ever watching, listening, but the college arena can be seen as a microcosm of the larger workplace. I deeply mean that and see that with a lot of my work. But why is it important to discuss mental health on college campuses? Like, let's tackle this from a student standpoint first. Like, why is it important to have these conversations in all their forms on college campuses?
I'll take this one first. So I think the question is, how could it not be important? Also signs point to the fact that not only is it important to have it, but it's necessary, it's critical. There's no question that the conversations need to be had. The age of onset of almost every mental health issue is the middle school, high school age. The college students are on their own, many of them for the first time, experiencing life for the first time and trying to figure out their identity. I think the other really, really critical piece that has been missing in our society for forever is that we don't talk about mental health until there is a crisis, typically. And so when you look at how typically in schools and in workplaces, mental health is addressed, it's a there is a crisis situation, may that be a suicide attempt, some other massive crisis situation, there is a letter from the top that says, we want to acknowledge this happened. Maybe there's one program afterwards as a preventative / responsive event, and then it's done until the next crisis happens. And the problem is there are so many people, as you already said, Josh, there's so many people who are just suffering and just struggling through life. And if we don't have these conversations every day, we're just going to get to another point where there's another crisis, another crisis, another crisis, and not create an environment where our college students feel comfortable reaching out for the help that they need. And so there are biological factors, there are social factors, but my argument is going to be, we need to be having this conversation on college campuses so that we normalize the conversation about mental health, so that folks feel comfortable getting the help that they need as soon as they need it, long before a crisis occurs. And like you, I'm a suicide loss survivor. I'm here to prevent suicide, but the work that I do is around mental health promotion and help seeking, so that we never even have to get to a point of having just to talk about suicide prevention.
Yeah. That is phenomenal. And to add on, particularly help seeking. I think that's always the aspect for me that it comes back to, because in my experience, much like you say, Alison, there was never conversation around mental health growing up. Of course, I grew up in Ohio, and I went to a private grade school and a private high school, and there was no acknowledgement, or at least when there was, it was oversimplified. It was stereotypical portrayals of mental health issues. And I think getting to college, when you do have a fundamental shift in your environment that you are not used to before then, you're also having a fundamental shift in your challenges as it comes to your identity, as it comes to your confidence, as it comes to your social outlet. When your environment is challenged that significantly, I think the one thing that can really prevent these issues is the promotion long before that ever happens, is making sure that even just one acknowledgement of how important mental health is, and one acknowledgement of how to seek mental health help, can actually sway someone away from a crisis and in towards help seeking. And I think that's something that's severely lacking. Even just over this last summer, I had the experience of a physical healthcare emergency. I effectively messed up my neck, and it was fascinating that I could, within a day of realizing that I had really done damage to my body, I could go to a primary care provider, and that primary care provider could say exactly what I needed. And when I went to the emergency room, they gave me the scans exactly that I needed. And they referred me to the neurosurgeons and the physical therapists that I needed. That is something that we just do not have in mental health care. In fact, it's very difficult, and it is starting to be more popular to have that kind of care coordination. But to just compare care coordination in physical health care to mental health care, we are allowing people to get to such an extent of emergency that the only option is to let that emergency or that crisis play out and then try to address it, which is just totally inadequate. And that's why I think it just is so incredibly important that we promote conversation among college students who can feel no shame in seeking help.
It's interesting. So much of when I talk about my lived experience narrative, I talk about this really tough period I went through in my mid-30s, which I've talked about and will continue to talk about. But I almost forget about, I mean, it's not that I keep it private, but I almost forget, and at times really don't talk much about that. I also went through a really bad period in my sophomore year of college, and actually also coming out of that was in therapy and was on medication for a semester. And my narrative on that, which is a narrative which I'm not sure we talk much about. We talk about, as very much Alice and Misha talk about the pressures and about all the new environments. And I think this is even more so when I was in college, such that you enter college a lot of times with a lot of big, high expectations, a lot of big dreams. This is supposed to be the ideal period of your life, and it's going to set up these other dreams. Any other dreams you have are going to come out of it. And there's such a high bar that is basically cleared for happiness, that if you fall a little bit short, it can sometimes be very tough emotionally, and that's kind of what I went through during my sophomore year of college. It's not that, in the greater scheme of things, you step back, it's not that anything really horrible was happening, but it's just because there was so much pressure on myself for this to be amazing times that set up amazing times in the future. And if I could go back, I would say to myself, you should have been a lot more patient with yourself, and you should have been, because those good times were going to happen. And you know what? You didn't need to solve or figure everything out by the time you were 20 or 21. But that wasn't what I was feeling at the time. And I think that that's also not always what college students are feeling at the time. And I think that that's another thing to make college students very, very vulnerable. The idea being that, well, if this is supposed to be the best 4 years of my life, that's also going to set up every other good time going forward. And I've got to basically set up myself up for my dream job coming out and meet a dream soulmate in college. Those things aren't going to happen to everybody. They aren't going to happen to most people. And if you don't have the right things to measure it there, it can be very, very disappointing.
It's so true. I cannot underscore enough what you're saying, both in terms that of when you aren't able to live up to your own personal expectations. And there are a number of people who are in college and who are first gen in college and or asking their parents to help pay, and they know they can't. So there's a lot of financial pressure. There's a lot of family pressure. There's a lot of personal pressure of, this is my time to be my best. And why can't I be my best? And what's wrong with me? And the problem is, until recently, so few of the real stories were out there. So I know, for my brother, he thought he was the only one on his campus who was struggling, and he thought there was something wrong with him, and everybody else was having the time of their lives, because you're all, college is the best time of your life. And, so he thought, like, genuinely, what is wrong with me that I can't live up to what everybody else is doing? But when you open that conversation and you start sharing your story, and people start thinking about when they really started struggling, it's almost always in middle school and high school and college. And yet it's all so quiet. So we're all doing it alone, thinking we're the only one. And so, I try to do my best to normalize the fact that you may not graduate in 4 years, and that's okay. Like, it takes 5 years, takes 6 years. Look at your idols in the world, figure out if they even graduated from college at all. There's such a narrative we place, especially for young adults, that this is what you do. And then we just kind of get to adulthood, and we forget to come back and talk to what actually happened in childhood for so many people. And it puts so much pressure on folks who just don't need it, and they don't deserve it. They haven't asked for it. And so that's where this conversation, this real talk, not sensationalizing, but just real talk about what is life like? How are you feeling? How do you help each other, so that we can actually get through day by day in a very normal way?
Absolutely. I think it's fascinating to hear the tangible aspects that you bring up, because I do think that, like, especially in my experience in college, I think it was this expectation of high achievement that becomes so internalized, I think, in the vast majority of students, and yet we aren't really provided ways or opportunities or good role models as to how we can tangibly do that when it doesn't come naturally. So I do think it's fascinating that when I got into college and I had these high expectations for myself, and I felt more and more self-isolated, I felt more and more like my social connectedness was being thwarted, and that my friends did not like me because I was depressed. These things actually created this cycle of deepening and deepening depression that again kind of led directly to that experience of a crisis. There was no airbag. There was no, parachute cord that I could pull and suddenly be able to recognize my situation for what it was, or to have perspective on what it was. And I do think it is the promotion of these kinds of conversations that can say it's absolutely normal to not graduate in 4 years. You might take an extra year. You might not graduate at all. Look at these successful people, like you said, Alison, look at these successful people that didn't graduate from college at all. But they found their passion, they found their skills, and they really thrive in life without something like a degree. It is fascinating, and I wish we would promote it even earlier, to say these are self-care opportunities. These are red flags for your mental health. It's okay when you experience these things. You can talk to people about it. prevent that cycle, prevent that worsening experience?
I've heard so many. I think this is the first time I've ever taken notes, because I'm like, there's so many good things, but I'm thinking like, I'm going to go out of order, but like just in terms of like how we present success, right? And like what that looks like and real expectations. And we hear people like, oh, I did this and now I'm here. And like, wait, what happened to like the 4 years of training in between? What does that look like? And so like, and I'm thinking about my own experience in terms of like presenting and doing like Zoom things now, because we're all doing Zoom. Like we're not going anywhere. So like on these things, I'm like, listen, y'all, like, all right, I'm the guy giving the talk about mental health. I'm the guy who's telling you how to do it, giving you the template. I had a crappy morning, right? My anxiety is through the roof. I present decently well, you know, sweater, nice home haircut, you know, doing my best. But like at the same time, and you know, I pay my taxes, I have real estate, I have blah, 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 blah. But like I'm having a hard time. And right now, like I want to be here, but I don't want to be here. You know what I mean? Like my nerves are shot. This is what anxiety looks like. This is one of the ways that anxiety looks like. So you too can experience, you know, but it's not anything to be ashamed about, right? It's okay to say. So like I think in this ties back into our conversation today, right now, but like there's been other episodes where we've talked about how it's so important for leaders, whether it be a thought leader, whether it be a cohort leader, whether it be the president of Active Minds at Baruch College, whatever, like I'm struggling, like, and I'm here today, and this is what it looks like. And so then you give permission for others to outwardly show that, you know. So I think that's important. Our leaders, in whatever sense of that word is, like, this is what success looks like, and it's like this, right? And when we know that, we can choose different self-care opportunities. And I think it's so. One of the points that you said before we could ask questions, Alison, was like, it's a pleasure to see active like kids, young people growing up in the generation of active minds and who are asking X of their workplace. And I think that's incredibly wonderful. And that's why we have these conversations, because it can now sort of explode into what we're doing now and beyond, and our grandkids and our great grandkids are going to have a better experience. The one thing I want to pick y'all's brain about, I think, because we're talking about help seeking, and I think that's so important. This is not necessarily a question we had on the little sheet, but we're talking about help seeking. So important, tremendously important. Like I can't stress it enough. But help offering behavior, I don't think are we talking about that enough? Because I'm thinking about on a peer level, you know, I really wanted to talk to my mom or my grandma or my roommate about blank. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed, and that might not even be part of the vocabulary, but that person in turn wanted to fix, wanted to solve, wanted to blank. And that help seeking that they learned fell flat. And now they're like, ooh, what do I do? Can I trust this new sort of help seeking? So what are you thinking about help offering? Just as a sort of like, how do we do that? What does that look like? Go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely critical, and exactly what you're saying, Josh. It's you know, for a long time in my policy and my research, I specialized in what I would call therapeutic compatibility. Too often in mental health care, we just try to get care. We just try to deliver care, but we don't really account for the fact that there is so much riding on the connection that you have with your therapist. There's so much riding on all these little factors that are going to make or break your mental health care recovery. And too often people do get burned. People get absolutely alienated from mental health care. So when help seeking is what we tell people to do and what we reinforce, but then when that fails, when there is no second step beyond that, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's very difficult to have something like that kind of experience where you finally get a therapist and it goes horribly wrong, or it's so uncomfortable and then you don't know what to do after that. Well, how do we fall back in that situation? Do we have people in our lives who know what to say, who know how to validate and acknowledge our experience, and who know how to do so in a way that doesn't stigmatize our experience, that doesn't undermine our coping mechanisms or our behaviors. I think particularly with something like depression, of course, I'm so glad to see the promotion of articles that are like, what not to say to someone who's experiencing depression, because I think that is very important. And I think that's what kind of is going to be the predecessor to encouraging help offering behaviors. But too often, I think there are still just some general, totally, I don't want to criticize people who don't know how to say the right thing, because these are just the ways that our societies have taught us growing up to treat things like depression. But too often people just don't know what to say. Even in totally separate circumstances. My brother passed away in 2013 to an epilepsy condition. And there were so many friends that I knew wanted to be there for me, but they had no idea what to say, or they were super uncomfortable with the idea of bothering me, or of asking about my brother and asking about it and thinking they might trigger me, or, something like that. But it's actually the most validating experience to have someone say, I don't know what to say, but I want to be here for you. And I think that is what needs to be encouraged. I think that kind of help offering behavior, the acceptance of not knowing, the acceptance of not being comfortable with it, but still being there, is what is going to make such a huge difference in someone's experience.
I couldn't agree more. And to go back to a little bit of the conversation we had before, the power of young adults. We've been hearing this from students who've been part of the Active Minds Network for a long time. And it was actually through an Active Minds chapter out in California who worked with other chapters in the state, which has now become kind of a national thing for us. We've created a training, what we're calling Everyday Conversations for Everyday Struggles. And with the idea being that, one of the challenges, Josh, I think we have in this sense of help offering is that people feel like, well, I'm not a trained doctor, so how can I give help? And so I'm going to stay quiet, right? And so people are afraid to say the wrong thing, and so they don't say anything. But exactly to your point, Misha, like we just need to be talking about it, and we need to acknowledge, I don't know what to say, but I want to be here for you. And so the training that we created at Active Minds is called VAR: validate, appreciate, refer. You can be a help offerer without providing clinical support. In fact, you should be a help offerer without providing clinical support, because you're not a trained doctor, but we are everyday people, right? Just like if you see somebody that you love with a cold, sneezing, you're going to say, gosh, do you have a cold? Do you want some chicken soup? You're not going to say, oh, I can't talk to you about what you're going through until you go to a doctor, because a doctor's going to help figure out what you have. No, we do what we can as people just to support each other. And it's the absolute same that needs to be happening in mental health. Validate somebody's experiences, appreciate that they're sharing with you, and then refer. And refer can be to a counselor, to inpatient services, but it can also be, do you want to go for a run? Or, do you need a distraction right now? Like, figure out with the person what is the best referral resource and help that you can provide. But it's about validating their experiences and acknowledging that, like, this is hard, and you shared that with me, and that's as hard as anything. And I just want to be here with you and for you. But it's just such an important piece of this conversation, because we can't just rely on the help seeker, because it's really hard to know when you need help. It's even harder to say that you need help. And there's so many people around who know that you need help. And again, we don't do it in any other health condition with anything else. And so if we look at this help seeking, help offering as a just like everyday person to person interaction to help people get the support that they deserve, then we can look at it in kind of this two-way street.
Mm.
I'm sorry.
Go, please. Please.
So Alison, something that just popped in my head, and that I think that the next generation, that the people that were in Active Minds when they were in college, that are going to bring to the workforce, I think is going to be very, very positive, is they will probably, hopefully, change the culture a little bit from the quote unquote, what I've heard people use, water cooler culture that we've had in the workforce. I know it's probably, that phrase is going to change a little bit just by the fact that we'll have more people on Zoom, but water cooler culture, I've been hearing, is still very much around. And when I say water cooler culture, it's basically people talking, hey, my kid got into Yale. Where did your kid get into? Or where are they applying? Which I think plays a huge role in the pressures that are manifested in young adults, people applying to college and people actually in college. I know in my generation, so much of what people went through, and so much maybe even to the extent of me and people close to me went through, was due to the effects of water cooler culture by the adults. I just was even hearing a few weeks ago, they were talking, I believe it was the University of Texas college football coach. And then, by the way, I'm a big sports fan and to an extent college sports fan, even though I think there's a lot of things that need to be fixed there. But they were saying that I think it was the Texas football coach, even though he had a good record, was fired. And why? Because they said, well, Texas is a big water cooler office place, and it's all about, well, if you're working with a bunch of Texas A&M people, they're going to be rubbing it, they're going to spend all day rubbing it in at the water cooler. We beat you, whatever, is 3 times in a row. And that's what's dictating a lot of these big decisions and big pressures that seep down to the college campus. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that that's something that we will work hard to change. And I think that, Alison, your active mind students who, as they enter the workforce, will hopefully change that, because we want people to have positive conversations at the water cooler. That's a big part of good workforce culture. But it should be maybe a little bit less about, well, I'm going to tell you why my kid is better than your kid, or I'm going to tell you why the school that my kid got into is better than the school your kid got into, or why my kid's grades or my kid's jobs is better than your kid. Because at the end of the day, society suffers when that happens.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that systems and structures change only because people change them. And so I know there's a lot of people who work at the top and work in policy and really important areas. From the beginning of my career, I have been working on that individual level because I've seen there's just such an interest and a power in an individual impacting individuals, and it's individuals who make decisions. So colleges themselves are starting to change because college students started this conversation and have been forcing their schools to make the change. And it is the same that's going to be happening in the workplace. I feel like we could talk about workplace mental health, and we could talk about, how many of this do you need and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's going to be when there is a CEO, when there is a director of HR, when there is a director of engineering who is talking about mental health, that is going to change workplace mental health. And they're going to change the policies and the structures and whatnot at their workplace because they get it. And because it's something they've taken on as their own, because they have to, because it's a change. And so that workplace culture is starting to change, and COVID has made it really hard. And to be very honest, we've had a number of workplaces reaching out to Active Minds this year because managers are realizing they don't have that water cooler to be talking to their employees. And how do you have these conversations over Zoom? But they're reaching out because they care. Like, that wouldn't have happened 5, 10, 15 years ago with a different generation in charge. So the change is happening. And I'm really optimistic about it. And it's just a question of how quickly, what kind of change is going to happen where.
I think it's really interesting that folks are reaching out to y'all, in terms of their employees and stuff, like knowing that you're more college focused or college facing. I've experienced a little of that in the sense that, like, staffs are, there's like even school, like if a school approaches me, it's going to be about their students. They're approaching me about their staffs now, which is interesting. Like, I'll do it. I love it. Like, I'm more than qualified, but I love that, not just for me, but in the sense that, like, whoever does it, like, we're focusing on our staff now too, and a little corporate, et cetera, too. But I think that, like, we're noticing that change. And I think that's another way also, like that, like what you mentioned, plus I think also the fact that, like, COVID is sort of forcing us to take a glaring look at these inequities that have been in our face, and then we kind of like, nope, it's over there. No, it's here. It's in our face right now. So I think that's something interesting. I think going back, I love the VAR training, the VAR training. There's something pirate about that. But I think that's really wonderful. Like, I'm a helper pirate. I think vulnerability begets vulnerability, right? So, like, hey, I don't know what to say. Great. Now we're cooking, right? Like, I love that. That validate, like, vulnerability is so important. Like, it's interesting. Like, a lot of students like, oh, I told my roommate to get into therapy. Awesome, that's wonderful. Have you ever been to therapy? No. Maybe you should probably go so you can achieve the benefits of blah, 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 blah. And or, talk about like the time you struggled or the time, your vulnerability is going to help them feel safe and open. And then validating, like, that was really hard for you to open up. I see that, and you're still shooting up and showing them. So that validation can be hard to verbalize at times, because I don't think we're all shown how to do that, or that's like at least not in where I grew up and what I saw in my culture. But it's something I'm trying to integrate into my own life, not just work. I think, so I think just those 2 points. And then quickly, just this popped into my head, but I've thought about this for a while. You said therapeutic compatibility, Misha. I was like, and you're in tech. I was like, we need a Tinder for therapists.
Yes.
A Tinder,
yes.
A Bumble, a Grinder. I don't care what it's called, but we need one.
I could not agree more. Yeah, exactly. And you guys you're making my mind race, because there are so many, threads here that I so appreciate you guys touching on. And to go back a little bit, I do think I'm reinvigorated and inspired when I do see some of the ways that our systems are changing and improving. So I don't mean to necessarily undermine any of those things when I do point out certain concerns that I have. And, it's like a prime example, actually, Alison at Active Minds, it was Rachel and Amanda who, when we realized that GW was still charging for all therapy sessions, students could not get therapy through the University Counseling Center, or they had to pay $50 a session, which was the most expensive of any university in the nation. Amanda and Rachel took it upon themselves to basically lobby the university, and they got 6 free sessions for every student. And that is the kind of change that I do see happening in colleges, which is fantastic. And then those college students starting to join the workforce. And I think I've even seen, like in my own company, in my day job, I work at General Assembly, which is like a coding boot camp for career pivoters. Fascinatingly, when I got there, I found out that they have an entire program for immersive students, because we put our students through this boot camp, which is, at least 80 hours a week expectations. So it's exhausting, it's tiring. And a lot of times it's something they haven't experienced in a long time. But GA actually went through the process of getting Ginger.io. If you guys know Ginger, it is an app that starts with coaching and then can elevate you to a therapist if need be. All of our students have access to Ginger.io, which is fantastic. And it does seem like it's the younger workforce that basically called for that and made it happen. And then in other ways too, I almost just wish that universities would buy in more. I think we are starting to see more of that. And it's been a while since I've even been involved with university healthcare services and policy. But things that strike me about universities is that it is a very unique place where you have very passionate people, students who are very passionate about social justice and very passionate about healthcare and about opening up conversations. And it's almost like in that microcosm, I wish they would take advantage of it more. I wish that universities would get behind this, that systemic support would be more common. Because of things like, when we have therapy, we have university counseling centers, which is great. And then what's in between that and the hospital? Well, nothing. There's literally nothing there. Occasionally I know that actually some universities are opening peer support centers, which is phenomenal. I wish I would see a lot more universities adopt the peer respite model for their students. I don't want students going to an ER when they could just go to a peer respite center and feel validated and feel safe. Things like that, I think, are prime opportunities for universities to implement and to not to make students guinea pigs, but to use their population that does need this help, that can use evidence-based help to really make this a more common practice. And then those students will be able to see the efficacy of that. They will be able to know it personally and take that forward with them. If I wanted one thing from universities in the United States right now, I think that would be it.
It's interesting. You both have mentioned that things will change when there's more from the top, and when we see CEOs being vulnerable. And while we do our best and we aim to keep everything nonpartisan, we're not afraid to refer to public political figures when they are doing things in the mental health sphere. And I'll just point out, as of 48 hours or so ago, we now have a president of the United States, basically the CEO of the country, who has been very, very open about his lived experience and very, very open about his suicidal ideation. And on day one, he basically, in speaking to his initial employees, said one thing about his workplace is that everyone's going to treat anybody with respect. And if there's one thing that you will lose your job for is disrespecting one of your coworkers. I've got to believe that that's going to make a difference, I hope that's going to make a difference, but I've got to believe that it moves the needle somewhat, at least in the conversation.
There's no question about it. And he's been open, he's been vulnerable, and he's used that vulnerability to invite other people's. I shared, I had an opportunity to meet with our now president when he was VP about 7-8 years ago. I'm going to butcher the timing, but I was in a meeting with him and a small number of folks on the anniversary of the shooting at Sandy Hook. And he had brought in family members of those who had died, and then two of us from the national mental health community. And it was a 2+ hour conversation with the then VP, now president, acknowledging his own experiences, but using those experiences to open it up for other people to share their experiences. And that's what it is. It's about, I think the leadership from the top is about showing that it's okay to have this and to feel this way and to have experienced this, and to let people reflect on their own experiences in hearing about somebody else's. And the power of that coming from a company CEO who, in the middle of April says, hey guys, like, I'm not doing well right now because this pandemic is like really kicking me, whatever it may be. The power of hearing that from your boss, your manager, your CEO, whatever it is, just gives everybody the chance to breathe a little bit, to say, okay, like I don't have to be holding it all together, and I'm not the only one. And that's where this conversation is, right? Like, that's where, as I keep talking about, it's not about sensationalizing. I don't care if we use the word clinical depression or, whatever it may be. And for different people, this has different levels of importance, but where it's going to begin is when we can have these everyday conversations, so that when somebody says, hey, how you doing today? You don't automatically have to say, I'm good. You can say, as Josh said, like, this is a shitty day. Like, I'm not doing okay right now. I know I'll be okay, but you asked, I'm actually going to answer the question. And we're not there, but we're getting there through conversations like this, through college students who are in college, or like that generation is just, they're not taking the bullshit anymore. And in some ways we need to give them the platform and move away, let them like lead us, lead this country, lead their schools, their families, and then wherever they go after college, because that's where this change is happening.
I want to validate, and then I want to ask a question. So I want to validate in the sense that, like, Efrem, I think whenever I ask you how you're doing, which is probably on a 7 to 10 day basis because of us doing this work, and sometimes we just chat, you actually give me a real answer. And it's like, and it takes you a second to think, but then it's like mostly good, this or that, it's not like good, fine, bad, it's a little more in depth. And that gives me a cue to then say, oh, I can kind of be honest. I can be honest with F, but I can also use that cue to then be more honest in these other conversations. So thank you for that. I think that's really wonderful. That's a nice sense of leadership.
Thank you.
Practicing what you preach. And then also the question, and Misha, you already kind of answered it, but feel free to divulge a little more if you'd like. But what can college campuses do more of to support student mental health?
Alison, do you want to take it first?
Go for it.
Okay, yeah, I'm very opinionated on this. I mean, it's obviously because of my personal experiences. I a lot of the challenges that I had as a student have been addressed. A lot of them have been addressed, which has been very nice. Policies that force students to withdraw when they have a suicidal experience, which is horrifying, which is going to absolutely prevent help seeking. It's going to absolutely make students scared to talk about their actual experiences. Fortunately, those are going away. I think that was very popular for a long time because of liability concerns. Universities didn't want families coming after them, but thank God that they're finally moving past that. That is like one thing in general that just from a policy perspective, validating a student's experience and validating the fact that they can experience suicidality, they can experience depression and anxiety and extreme, sickness, if you want to call it that, like a physical sickness or a physical healthcare challenge. They can experience that and stay in college. They can get the help they need and stay around their friends. That's the kind of thing that I want to see more of. But there's also all kinds of things, and that I will actually plug the JED Foundation for. JED, of course, is working with JED Campus, right? So they're going to the universities and they're actually trying to get universities certified, almost like a green LEED building certification. You can go to a university and say, do these things, and then you can wear this as a badge of pride. And those things can include things like means prevention. I think that's the most obvious step. I think we're just finally starting to see this flip of presumption that acknowledging a mental illness or a mental health challenge will automatically undermine what you do. That just acknowledging it is undermining you, is undermining your authority if you're an executive in a company, is undermining your right to be at college. Finally, we're flipping from that to recognize that not acknowledging it, that suffering in silence is actually what is going to heavily undermine you and heavily undermine a workplace productivity rating and heavily undermine a student's satisfaction with their university. Finally, I think we're seeing that flip, but there's obviously more work to be done.
Alison, thank you.
I don't have anything critical to add. I think what Misha has said is spot on, and the schools need to take a lead from their students, take a lead from each other. I will say one of the interesting things in our evolution. So, I've been in this field now for 20 years, and Active Minds introduced about 7 or 8 years ago a Healthy Campus Award, which is recognizing schools that are exemplary in their treatment of student health and well-being, which includes mental health. And each year we have more and more applicants, meaning that each year there are more and more schools who are changing their world and their policies, B, are proud of the policies they're changing, and C, want to be recognized for their care for student health and well-being, which had we introduced this award 15 years ago, we wouldn't have had a single applicant because that wasn't a priority for any school. And so as Misha said, there are a number of policies that are changing. There are still a number of policies that are archaic and punitive, and there are a number of schools that still have the extraordinarily, punitive and archaic policies. But the change is happening and shifting, and folks are learning from each other. And again, where I see change is when there is somebody within a leadership role who gets it or who is willing to listen. Because change is made when folks approve, a policy, a recommendation, and it has to come from somewhere. And so when that the university leadership can identify that mental health is a public health issue here at our school, where our students' well-being is part of their ability to be a successful student at this school. And heck, it actually may even keep them in school and make them a happy alumnus and all the, the bottom line pieces that schools really need to care about. That's when we see these changes happening. And it's hard to watch and hard to know it hasn't all changed, but having been in here for 20 years, I also see the changes that have happened and am encouraged by the fact that they're just going to continue happening.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I know we're getting close to the end, so maybe after this, I'll give we'll give Alison and Misha their final words. I'm sorry there, but I just wanted to quickly just echo what Misha said. You're absolutely right, and just from my personal case, when I was going through that slide, middle of my sophomore year, withdrawing or going home from college would have actually been the worst thing for me. What actually was good was is that I was able, and not really do it, to basically take a lighter workload that semester. And then some people, maybe from unexpected places, were very supportive. Specifically, I'm thinking of one person who at that point was an acquaintance, who was in a leadership position, who was very, very supportive and reached out to me. And I think I'm going to send her a note maybe a little later on today, because even though I thanked her, I'm not sure I thanked her to the extent that I should have. And things like that help to turn me around. Different people have different routes and different things to take, but Misha's right. If colleges should be supportive of people who want to stay in, who feel that that's the best route for them, because that may be how some people heal as well too. Lord knows it was for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Just a quick, what I think, just hearing everything that y'all are talking about and knowing that we have about 2.5 minutes, I'd like to see universities and colleges approach the alcohol talk differently. Like, let's talk about it from a mental health standpoint, as opposed to sort of like 1 ounce of this is 6 ounces of that. Like, nobody wants to hear that. It's not useful. Stop it. Bring it on mental health. More peer. More emphasis on peer support and peer respite and things of that nature. I wonder if it's possible even to make, health promotion, I think is important. Let's be proactive instead of waiting for people to come to us and wait for like a crisis situation. Let's be proactive. And I also wonder if there's some way, we kind of talked about this in the last episode. You took the afternoon off, but just if there's a permission or incentive-based way to have students engage in services. And then because there's something along the lines of public health initiatives that do stuff like that. And then Alison, you kind of said about the economic impact. Like, let's talk about your actuaries and your trustees and your board, and like, what does it look like if these students don't matriculate? And if they're not alumni and they're not, like, what does it look like short-term and long-term? So I think like, let's bring all that into the conversation. We have about 1.5 minutes left. So I want to offer the opportunity for a last word. Otherwise, well, let me offer the opportunity and then I'll close down. So if there's something pressing.
No, yeah, there was one other thing you guys made me think of, and it's just like, for as cliched as it is for, like the boomer and the millennial generation to buck heads in the workplace, you guys made me think of like Gen Zers and what they bring to the table. And I'm so inspired by, like the TikTok presence of mental health and Instagram's presence of mental health. I just want, Alison, like you said, it's like, I want to be able to create these systems and then get out of the way. Let the Gen Zers, they are a powerful generation and they're going to make some real change. So it's when they get to college that I really want to see that. But that's about it.
We've said it all. I've talked enough. There's so much to be done, and yet there's also so much reason to have hope. And I think that's, I carry both of those. And especially as we talk about the college student mental health and college mental health world, the change is happening. There needs to be more done, but it's happening. And it is the Gen Zers. It is, it's the folks who aren't going to tolerate it anymore, who are making that change. And so they're making it now, and it's up to us just to let that happen.
Thank you. Efrem?
I know we're short on time. I'll just say, everybody keep doing what you're doing. And if ever we want to regroup and talk again, I would love that, because so much more to talk about. And this was amazing.
Agreed. Thank you so very much, Alison, Misha. As always, Efrem. This has been Cubicle Lift episode number 7. I did the research a few moments ago. This is number 7. So thank you, everybody. This is a big, honest conversation on workplace mental health. I'm Josh Rivedal for Efrem Epstein, Alison Malmon, Misha Kessler. Thank you so very much. Be well, be safe.